I think we'll get started. I'm just going to mute everyone for the moment. Welcome to our webinar today on Southwest Minnesota Arts Council's Grants for Individual Artists for fiscal year 2021, which for us runs from July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2021. I am Carolyn Koska, the Financial and Grants Administrator here at Southwest Minnesota Arts Council. And I'll just start out giving us a little overview of what we're going to talk about today. I'll talk a little bit about Southwest Minnesota Arts Council, then we'll jump right into the guidelines for these three programs. We'll go over to the website and you'll be able to see what resources are available for you there. Then we'll go into the actual grant system and take a look at a couple of applications so you can see what kinds of questions you might need to answer. And we'll finish up by talking about the entire grant process, basically what happens after you submit an application. Like I said, I have everyone muted right now. We'll stop a couple points today for questions, or feel free to type those into the chat window and I'll try and kind of watch for those. And then at the end of the presentation, I will unmute everyone again and we can talk directly then. So a little bit about Southwest Minnesota Arts Council, or SMOC. The Southwest Minnesota Arts Council is a nonprofit organization committed to promoting and encouraging the development of the arts in the 18 counties of Southwest Minnesota by serving as a source of funds and technical services, which enable local organizations, educational institutions, and individuals to sponsor, create, and promote the arts in their communities. Here is our region down in the southwest corner of the state. We are one of 11 regional arts councils that cover the whole state of Minnesota. Our funding comes from the state of Minnesota in two forms, one through an allocation from their general fund, and then through the Arts and Cultural Heritage or Legacy Fund. We also receive funding from the McKnight Foundation, and that money goes toward most of the grants that we're going to be talking about today. And finally, we also receive funds from local donors and members. Some things that we are committed to: supporting artists and arts organizations in creating, producing, and presenting high-quality arts activities, overcoming barriers to accessing high-quality arts activities, instilling the arts into the community and public life, supporting high-quality, age-appropriate arts education for all ages to develop knowledge, skills, and understanding of the arts, and supporting events and activities that represent the diverse ethnic and cultural arts traditions of the region. So these are just some things to keep in mind as you're thinking about projects you might like to do, because ultimately we hope they relate back to these commitments that we have. So we'll jump right in and talk about the guidelines for two of these grant programs for today. We're going to talk about the emerging and the established career artists together, because the programs and what you can do with the funding are pretty similar. So for both of these grants, in order to apply, you need to be an adult, at least age 18 by the time of signing your contract. You need to be a resident of one of the 18 counties of our service region, and we acknowledge that this region occupies the traditional, ancestral, and contemporary lands of the Dakota people who have stewarded these lands throughout the generations. And for that region residency requirement, we ask that you are living in our region for at least 6 months before applying and remain within our region during your grant period. And for these grants, all art disciplines are accepted. The intent of these two programs are helping you as an artist to explore a new level in artistic development, to reach a new level in your professional career, to increase public awareness of your work. We hope that it will address your artistic needs and inspire creativity and increase your ability to live and work as an artist in this region. And then for more specific things of what you can actually do with these funds, if you are working on a new body of work, You can use this to purchase any supplies that you need. You can compensate yourself for the time spent working on that, or if you need to cover daycare costs in order to allow you time to work on that, that is eligible as well. You can attend any kind of workshop or conference or class for either professional or artistic development. You can do a one-on-one study with a mentor. You can rent space either to present your work or studio space or for other activities. You can do research toward future projects, develop a portfolio, have your work framed or recorded, and you can also use the funds for editing or other costs related to publishing. And here's where the two programs differentiate between emerging and established career. And it's really a continuum rather than a clear-cut definition between the two. But generally, an emerging artist would have a more limited, though still promising, record of accomplishment. If they're a visual artist, they probably have not had a solo show yet. And they're really at an early stage of their career development, which we look at separately from development of artistic expression or age. Someone at any age could be either an emerging or an established career artist. So then if you're over towards the established career side of the spectrum here, it's more likely that you're going to have more significant artistic accomplishments. You are sought after for solo shows or performances depending on your discipline, and recognized by other peers in the arts throughout this region. So if you're having trouble trying to decide which category to apply in, you can always give us a call and we can talk that through and see what makes the most sense for you. But the first place you'll want to look is your artist resume, or if you make a list of the things that you have accomplished with your art. So you would be looking to see what you had for any training, what sort of exhibitions or presentations of your work you've had, just kind of going down this list. And sort of the more you have of these things, the more likely you are to be able to apply under the established career category. So emerging artists are able to request up to $2,500, and established career artists may request up to $7,000. For both of these, no match is required, which means that unless your project costs more than the amount you can request, you won't have to put up any of your own funds toward the project. Then just a few eligibility things to be aware of. The following are not eligible for these grants: equipment requests that are not specifically tied to the proposed project, credits or materials necessary for fulfilling degree requirements for students, applications that are really about developing your teaching career, if that would be developing curriculum plans or teaching materials. We really want the focus of these grants to be on your artistic career as a professional artist versus as a teacher. Also ineligible are requests for new building construction or purchase of real estate, activities for the religious socialization of the participants or audience, activities that attempt to influence any state or federal legislation, payments of debts incurred before the grant begins, and applicants with a past SMOT grant project still in progress. So you can only have one of these grant projects going at a time, or if you have a past due final report from a previous grant. So that's a quick overview of some of the eligibility guidelines, but it's a good idea to read through. We have a document that goes through the specific guidelines for each of these programs, and another one that are some just general guidelines for all of our grants. So it's good to take a look at those, read through those in detail, and we'll take a look a little later about where you can find those. Now we're going to jump over and talk about the Community Collaboration Grant, open to the same group of people, adults at least age 18 living in our region. And again, all art disciplines are accepted. For this grant, there isn't any distinction made between emerging or established artists. It is open to any artist. But the intent of this grant program is to fund projects that bring an artist together with a community in a creative and collaborative relationship. And we're looking for a project that's going to have a strong impact on both the artist and the community. So we're looking for the artist to develop artistically through creating a new work, and also the artist to collaborate with the community to introduce them to the arts in a new way, especially reaching a part of the population that is not normally exposed to that particular art form. So we do want the project to take into consideration the actual community that is being part of it. For this, the artist will need to have a community partner organization to give support to the project. So they could maybe handle your advertising for you, provide space for some of the activities, etc. And that partner can be a city government, chamber, arts council, historical society, or other kind of nonprofit organization, but not a school. The Community Collaboration Grant is available for up to $10,000. Again, no match is required, and we're just letting people know that we are able to fund just one Community Collaboration Grant this year. Some additional eligibility items to be aware of with this grant. So those restrictions that we mentioned earlier for the other two grants still apply here. Also, this is not the place where you would apply for taking classes, use it for fees for entering juried competitions, doing traveling for research. Also, you cannot do any activities take place outside of Minnesota. This particular grant uses state funds instead of the McKnight funds that the other two use. So the activities are limited to within the state. Also ineligible would be activities that are not open to the public, requiring artists to pay excessive entry or exhibition fees, and educational projects within a school system. Again, good to check the complete guidelines for this grant program. A little bit about dates to consider for your project. You'll need to choose a start date and an end date. So for all three of these programs, this information applies. So we consider your start date as soon as you start doing anything towards your project, even if you're just ordering supplies, registering for a conference, paying any kind of down payment on fees, running any auditions or rehearsals, doing any advertising. So all of that is considered starting your project. With that in mind, then your start date should not be the date of your first activity or event. So if you were registering for some conference that you were going to attend, your start date would not be the first day of the conference. You would need to back that up far enough to give yourself time to register and travel, etc., because you cannot spend any funds before your project start date. If there's something that just absolutely has to be paid for before the earliest start date you can have, you need to leave that out of your grant budget. So if you had to pay a down payment on registration for a class ahead of time, you could include the remainder that you were going to pay in the budget, but that down payment would have to be left out. You'll also need to choose an end date for your project. All projects awarded this year need to be finished up by June 30th, 2022. And it's a good idea to just give yourself even more time than you think. Then in case things take longer with your project than you planned, you still have plenty of time to finish up. And if you get done early, then you're certainly welcome to submit your report early. You don't have to wait until the end date that you chose. So we have 2 rounds in which you can apply this year. The first one is already passed. That was August 12th. And for that deadline, you could start projects as early as October 1st. And then our remaining round for the year, round 2, the deadline is coming up on January 13th. And you can start your project as early as March 1st for that deadline. And also please be aware that your applications need to be submitted by 4:30 p.m. on the deadline date. The grant system will not allow you to submit after that time. I'm going to stop for a moment here, see if we have any questions. I'm just going to unmute people here, and I'll just wait for a little bit to see if you have any questions for so far.
Hello, Carolyn. This is Deborah Lee Fader.
Hi.
Hi. My question is, if I am helping Jamie Niemeyer, who's our artist that I'm trying to facilitate a grant for, and we use our actual banner as the Cultural Diversity Council of Upper Minnesota River Valley, does that then limit me as far as applying for an organizational grant?
She would need to create a separate account for her application.
We do have that. She has her own sign in, and I'll be helping her. But is she the closing date for this grant is January 13th. I don't know when the organizational grant development begins and ends, where you have to have the information in. All we would be doing with Jamie is being her umbrella. You said you need a community or a nonprofit to sponsor.
Yeah, if she was doing the community collaboration.
Oh, I
grant.
see. Otherwise, it's just, I would just be helping her with her grant. And so
Yeah.
then that way we could actually still apply for the organizational or the community grant. Correct?
Yeah, so your organization could apply for our
Yes,
grants that we have for organizations.
that's what I
But
meant.
the community collaboration grant, only the artist can be an applicant for that.
Okay, I understand that. That's good to know. All right, well, thank you for answering my question.
I think we'll move on here. I'm just going to mute everybody again. And we're going to head over to our website. So there are a couple of places on our website that will bring you to our grant system. One is just on the home page. If you scroll down a little bit here, there's this black grants box. There's a login button there. Then each of the grant pages has the login button as well. So we're going to head over to our grants for artists. And here is that button to log in to the system again. So this will be on the page for each of the grant programs. Each page will also have the important dates for the deadlines, kind of when you can expect to hear about the grant, your earliest start date. So that is all here. Then we have some materials posted. We've got the grant guidelines for this specific program, and then our general guidelines that apply to all of the grant programs. So take a look at those. Then we have the application questions in a Word document. Some people prefer working on their draft in a Word document first and then pasting it into the application within the system later. You don't have to do things that way, but if that's something you'd like to do, that's available for you there. You can take a look at what the budget form looks like. We've got the scoring criteria here that you can find out what the reviewers will be looking for when they are reading and scoring your grant. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. We also have final report questions here, so you can get an idea of what kind of questions you'll have to answer about your project. Again, that's in a Word document. And then we just have a couple of tutorials for you in working in the grant system. There's a quick video tutorial that helps you just get started, and then this PDF grant system guide goes into a lot more detail. So we're going to go ahead and click that Apply Now button to go into the system. If you already have an account in the system, you could just go ahead and log in. If you are a totally new user, you can create a new account here. If you're not sure whether you have an account in here or not, please contact us and we can let you know and get that all sorted out. I am going to log us in here. So when you log in, if you've been working in the system before, you'll be taken to your dashboard, which just lists everything that you're working on here. But if you are totally new to this system, you'll be taken to this apply page as the first thing when you enter the system. And it has listed here all of the grants that we have available currently. You'll just need to scroll through and find the one you're applying for. And we'll take a look at the Individual Artist Emerging Grant. So it just has a couple of details about this. Again, if you want to take a look at the application without actually starting anything, you can click this preview button. Otherwise, you can click apply to start your application. Now that we're in an application, I'm going to point out a couple of buttons to be aware of. We've got a link to Google Translate here, which if you want to be working in a different language, it will change the interface of the system and the questions to that language for you. This button, Copy Previous Answers, is helpful if you have done something in the system before. You can find a previous application and copy your answers over for any questions that are the same between both applications. And then there's this Collaborate button. If you want someone to work with you on your application, you can send them an email here to invite them, choose what level of permission you'd like to give them, and ask them what you'd like them to do. If you just want them to proofread for you or help you attach some files. So this will send an invitation to that person. And then all they'll need to do if they don't already have an account in the system is just create a password. So they'll be able to log in and work on this application as well. Just as you start the application, we have a couple places here where you can get help. If you'd like to schedule some time with me to talk about your project or you have questions on the application, here's a quick way to schedule that. You can just choose how you want to meet and choose a date and a time, and it will just schedule that for you. Or you can always email any questions to me. My email address is there. You'll need a name for your project. Does not need to be anything fancy, just something that is describing what you're planning to do. You can enter the amount you're going to request here, but you'll probably want to wait until you have finished your budget to fill that in. This contact information question, if you're just making an account for the first time, won't really apply to you, but you'll just look up here at the contact info that's already in there and let us know if that's still correct, or if you are, for instance, working with a school as well, and the school is showing up as your organization and you need to put in your personal contact information, you can do that here. If you click that, there'll be an area here to enter that information. Then here are just a couple links to some of those things we already talked about, the guidelines, application questions, scoring criteria. Then we also point out that when you look at those narrative fields, you'll see that the character limit is really huge. And we are not at all expecting you to come anywhere near using that up. It's just there in case there's a particular question that you really have a lot to say on, but really the reviewers appreciate concise answers. So the first thing you will talk about is describing the project that you're wanting to do. If you're going to be making some new work, what are you hoping to produce during that grant period? What is your artistic vision for the work? Is there something you're trying to say with your work, a particular aesthetic you're going for? Then if your project includes something else like a class or a workshop, you could describe that opportunity here along with a teacher's qualifications, if that applies to your situation, and then kind of outline a timeline for your project. Next, we have a place where you can enter some extra materials if you think that will help people understand your project a little better. If you want to talk more about the study opportunity that you're doing and perhaps attach or add links to a teacher's samples of their work. If you need to explain some particular unusual equipment that you're going to be purchasing, or talk about the mediums or techniques that you're working with that might be unfamiliar to some people. So this is just an optional area where you can add some of that information. Here you'll put in your start and end dates. Then we come to the budget form. You're going to click here, which will bring up a PDF budget form for you. If you open it within Adobe Acrobat Reader, you'll be able to have the form calculate for you. So this is just a quick free download if you don't have that already. But we're going to open the budget form here. You can type in a title here so we know which application the budget form belongs to, and then you'll just list any items here that you're purchasing, or if you're calculating out how much you are paying yourself for your time, and then you can enter in amounts over here, and you'll see it is totaling for you down at the bottom. Then here is where you'll type in the amount you're requesting. It gives you reminders again about what those limits are for either the emerging artist or established career artist. And then if your cost of your project is more than the amount you can request, down here in this other funding sources, you can list where the funding is coming from for those expenses. So once you've got this filled out and saved to your computer, then you can come back here and upload that file. It'll bring up your files here and you can just choose which one you want to upload. Pretty simple. Then in the budget narrative field, if you've kind of run out of room in your budget form explaining in detail particular supplies that you're getting or calculating out some mileage or hours or something, this is a good place to add that information in. This next section is all about you and your experience and your work. So you have an option to either upload your artist resume or to enter the same kind of information just in narrative form into this text field. Then it asks if you are specifically working in the folk or traditional art area. It asks you to explain your connection to the cultural community that your art form is rooted in and what recognition you and your work have from that community. There's a spot to link to your artist website if you have one. Then this next place is where you can attach samples of your work. There are some parameters here of what to submit depending on if you have written samples or images, audio, video. We've got a couple of links to some instructions if you're wanting to combine your images or files into one PDF, which there are just 3 upload fields here, so you may have to combine things if you have a lot. Then you also have the option to provide websites, or if you're linking to a video of your work, and you can describe those above here. Then you're asked about what contribution this project will have to your growth. First asks for kind of a where are you now in your artistic career, and then how this project will contribute to your growth as an artist and what artistic needs this project is meeting for you. So this is all on what impact is this project having on you and your art. Then we've got a data collection section. None of this has any bearing on your application, just some information we have to gather and pass on to the state. So some audience number things, number of adult artists, there will for sure be one, which is you participating. As an emerging artist, you may or may not have an actual audience. You're not required to be sharing your work at this stage. The established career artists are required to share their work with the community in some way. So they would probably have numbers to put in here. And then some of these other questions here just have view status codes or discipline codes. So you would just click the link. It gives you a list of codes. You would choose whatever one fits your situation best and just type that in there. We do ask about ethnic characteristics and some other characteristics. It is to your advantage to fill those out, although they're optional. We do have, which we'll talk about later, some extra points that your application can earn with those characteristics. Then it gives you a chance to enter your legal name. And then if you, as an artist, go by another name or there's another name for which you've previously applied for grants, you can enter that here and then choose which one of those names you'd like us to use when we say a grant was awarded to. And then finally, here is your signature. You'll check this box saying that everything in the application is correct to your knowledge and that you agree that you are meeting all of the eligibility requirements. And then you'll type in your name here as a signature. Then down at the bottom, we have, you can either save or submit your application when you're ready. We're going to hit save here. When you do that, you'll see it'll bring up all of the questions that have not been answered yet. So that just gives you an idea of what you have left to do. Right now it's listing all of them since we haven't done anything. If you want to keep working, you would click continue here, but we're going to go back to the dashboard. And now you can see on your dashboard, here's this application that we just started. And if you want to are returning and want to keep working on that, you would just click edit application here. And this will be the same place if you're awarded a grant where you'll come back to get your contract and your final report. We're going to head actually back to that apply page and just briefly go through that community collaboration grant. Here it is, because that does have some different questions. It does ask you about your project, but also what community you're going to be working with, describing that, describing how the community is going to be involved in your project. This would be the information about the community partner, and you need to upload an agreement between you and the partner that outlines what each of you is doing, if there's any rules about use of space, etc. Some information about your planning and the publicity you're planning to do. Then we have this little section on reaching the underserved. We have some definitions here, but we're looking for you to describe the groups in your community that are underserved or underrepresented, which might be defined by race or ethnicity, language, socioeconomic status, ability, etc. And then what you plan to do to reach out to or involve one or more of those underserved groups in the community so that they can participate in your project. And you'll also talk specifically about accessibility as well. Some of the same questions here. This budget form is a little different. It has things broken out a little more for you here. Again, this will total for you. You can stick in the amount you're requesting, and if your cost is more than what you can request here, again, you would list those other funding sources. This section about your work is exactly the same as in the other applications, as is the question about the impact on you as an artist. But a different thing here, since we are using state funds, we need to connect to these Minnesota Arts Outcomes. So you would choose at least 2 of these outcomes, one for yourself and one for the community. And these are kind of broad, top level kinds of outcomes. And then you'll need to look for each of those at specific changes that will take place related to those outcomes and how you plan to evaluate that. So there's an example for you here. Here's someone's sample project, the outcomes that they chose, the changes they were hoping would take place, what they were going to do to gather results, and then what they would look for in those results that would indicate success. And then finally at the bottom, it translates these little boxes into what you would actually enter into the application. There's also a blank outcomes worksheet here if you want to do some outcomes brainstorming on that. And then the rest just finishes up the same. So we are going to head back to our slides here for a minute. And I will see again if there are any questions. Not hearing any questions at the moment. I'm going to move on for now. And we'll just look at some tips for you as you are working on your application. It's a good idea to start really early so you have plenty of time if you're needing to figure out what your costs for this would actually be, or to get any questions answered before you get started. Also good to read the guidelines carefully. You saw in the application that a lot of the questions have more than one part to them, so make sure to check that you are getting an answer to each part of those. We already kind of talked about keeping your answers really clear and concise. This is not as formal as it may seem. You can feel free to just use everyday language in your application, as long as you are clearly explaining what your project is and answering those questions. No need to try to pad out your application with flowery language. It's also good to assume that the grant reviewers don't know anything about you or your project. They are restricted to basing their scores and comments on what is in the application. So even if they know something about your work that you forgot to put in the application, they are supposed to ignore that and just base it on what is there. So keep that in mind. And it's also good to have someone proofread your application. We have multiple opportunities for you to get assistance with your application. First, it's a great idea to have a chat with us to talk about your project before you even start an application. And we can make sure that you're applying under the right program, that your project is eligible, and answer any questions you might have there. And you can certainly contact us with questions as you're working on filling out your application. We also can review your application before you submit it. And if you let us know up to about 2 weeks before the deadline, we can guarantee that we're able to take a look at it for you. We can just check to make sure you have everything that's required, that you are answering the questions from the right angle, etc. So we can definitely do that for you as well. So once you submit your application, mock staff will review it for eligibility and completeness. If you are missing something at that point, you have a 48-hour period to remedy that. And then that is kind of the last point of contact with the staff. We actually do not have any say in what gets funded or not. So those applications then will go on to a panel of individuals from around the SMOC region, and they will discuss the applications and score them based on the criteria for the program, which we'll look at in a minute. And then finally, those scores will go to the full SMOC board, who will make funding decisions based on the recommendations from that grant review panel. So the criteria that the panel will be looking at for emerging and established career artists, they will be looking at the feasibility of the project, which would be, did you give yourself enough time? Do you have the right supplies? Things like that. Then they'll take a look at your work and experience, which is where those work samples are very important because that is worth the most amount of points among these criteria. And then finally, they will look at the project's contribution to your artistic growth. For the community collaboration grant, all of the criteria we just mentioned are used again with the addition of merit of the community project. If your grant is awarded, you'll need to complete a contract within 30 days. Then once you've completed your contract, you'll receive 80% of your grant award before your start date if you submitted your contract in time for that. Then you'll receive the remaining 20% of your grant award after your project and final report have been completed. You'll need to acknowledge the grant funds on any publicity that you have about your project. We will give you a credit line along with your grant contract, so you'll know what to use for that. You may also need to use this Minnesota Legacy logo depending on the source of funds for your grant. And we will send everything you need, both for credit lines, posters, logos, so you will have what you need for that. Your final report will be due within 60 days after your project end date. And it's a good idea to take a look through that report as you're actually starting your project so that you know what kinds of information you'll need to gather throughout. Definitely, you're going to need to have all of your receipts of anything that you purchase. If there's any attendance of audience, outcomes related to your goals, etc. So that was it on our individual artist grants for today. I'm going to talk briefly about a new grant program that we have this year, our Artist Equity Grant. And this grant program is specifically for Black, Native American, and other artists of color. They are working on an ongoing deadline, so applications can be submitted anytime through May 1st, and decisions will be made as the applications come in. And you can learn more about this grant program. We have a webinar on this coming up on January 19th. Finally, here's some contact information for us. The best thing these days is to contact us by email, as we're kind of in and out of the office. If you're planning to come by the office, it's a good idea to call ahead and make sure someone is there, because like I said, we are in and out these days. But again, feel free to contact us anytime with any questions. I'm going to unmute everyone again here if there's anything you would like to talk about. That is the end of our presentation for today. So I will just hang out here for a while if you'd like to have a chat. Well, I'm not hearing anything else, so I am going to sign off. Thanks for joining us today, and we hope to hear from you.